Hey friends, I'm Christy, and you're listening to Rock the Damn Boat. If you've ever bitten your tongue to keep the peace or said yes when every part of you wanted to say no, this one's for you. We're diving into the messy, real stuff that people pleasers like me have spent years avoiding. And it's time to have the hard conversations, shake things up, and learn to stand tall, even when it makes waves. And I am editing an episode that was so powerful and included so much wisdom about our intuitive gifts, about what it means to be an empath. I have a lot of conversations that run well beyond the 45 minutes that I try to limit the podcast to. Usually by the time I edit, it's down to about 45 minutes. But this one went on for an hour, and I feel compelled to split it into two parts. I want to share my own personal insights as it relates to some of the conversation. And Nicole is an intuitive coach, and she gives a lot of great insights and questions for you to think about as you start to get quiet and still and listen. And right now in my life, that is so important for me. I am at a crossroads once again with my career journey. I have thrown a lot at the wall to see what sticks in my entrepreneurial journey. And now I have actually launched the community that I had been circling for 6 months and knew that was what I wanted to do. It is a place for women to gather online. We are bombarded by messages and noise and these courses that you can take, and what the Thrive Collective is a space for you to, yes, hop online, but be real time and share live conversations, real time energy. You can co-regulate through Zoom just like you would in person. And if you've ever experienced something like a co-working or body doubling call, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. We have live yoga and movement. We'll probably get into some Pilates and some other movement in the future. We have coaching calls talking about a project that you're wanting to bring to life. Maybe you need a little more courage in your life in some way, and I'm going to help with that too. It is not meant to be another task or another obligation. It is a space that if you are like me and craving more real-time connection and sharing energy and having fulfilling conversations, this is what it's for. Nicole and I talk a lot about energy, and actually my friend Becky and I talked about energy and transfer of energy. And so I think that it's important that we surround ourselves with other people who match or even elevate our energy. If you find that you're surrounded by people who constantly bring you down or aren't supporting your endeavors, then the Thrive Collective might be for you. It is $44 a month right now for founding members, and we still have a few spots left, so you can check it out at thrivewithchristy.com. Now, one of the things that Nicole brings up in this conversation is I asked her if she believed in some of these spiritual ideas as a kid. And she makes a reference to it being like an archaeological dig. I didn't even share this with her at the time, but a few years ago, maybe during the pandemic or somewhere around 2020, I bought a book at Half Price Books called Something More: Excavating Your Authentic Self. It's by Sarah Bon Bronick, and her name is not spelled at all like it sounds, but you can look up Something More. It was such a fascinating book to me, and she also wrote Simple Abundance, which a lot of people have read. I have not read that book, but Something More was transformational for me. She talks about ways to go back to things that you originally enjoyed, or, I was early in sobriety and I didn't really know what I liked, what my values were. And this book really helped me identify those. there were fieldwork exercises, and one of them was to go back and see, did you have a box of childhood mementos or anything that you could go back and look at? And I do. I have this huge tote that I get out every few years. I look at old yearbooks. I look at class assignments, different things ranging from the poetry book that I wrote in third grade and won a creative arts award for, all the way through college and my college report cards and things like that. So I have this huge accumulation of different mementos throughout my life. And I was able to go through those, read old journals, and understand who I was and who I was becoming in those days. And one of the most interesting things was that as I started to embrace spirituality that didn't look like the organized religion I was raised on, I started to get back into the idea of spirit guides and tarot cards. And I remembered that I had a tarot deck when I was 14 or 15. And there was even a journal entry where I had written down the cards that I had drawn. My 14-year-old self was trying to interpret my tarot cards. So those were things that I was really into. I think that our family friend, Gigi, probably had a lot of influence over me just being able to explore the idea of being a free spirit. And I had the pleasure of visiting with Gigi not long ago, and again, reminding myself that I always had this interest. It always piqued my curiosity to look for things that might be a little more on what we would call woo side. If you look at indigenous religion and this idea of the great mystery, I just didn't understand things, and animals represented certain characteristics. I find that fascinating. So there doesn't have to be one way that you look at your spirituality either. And some of these healing practices that are from Eastern religions are just as powerful. We think sometimes as Americans that it has to be one way, and there are so many religions, so many other cultural traditions throughout the globe that I just invite you to have an open mind. And if you want to know more about yourself and maybe what your childhood dreams were and what you, like I talk about in this interview, I got so locked into my logical brain that I couldn't really tap into like what my heart wanted or what my intuition was telling me. And reading and doing the exercises in something more really helped me uncover that. So I wanted to share that tip leading into this conversation with Nicole Beaudin and give you that tool, something more, excavating your authentic self. I always encourage people to buy books on bookshop.org or thriftbooks.com because you can save some trees and usually get a pretty good deal on your books. Bookshop.org are new books, but they support independent bookstores. And then thriftbooks.com, of course, is used books that you can get at quite a steal. So I am excited to bring you this conversation with Nicole Beaudin, and let's get into the conversation. I am thrilled to have my guest on today. Nicole Beaudin is an alignment leadership coach and the facilitator for heart-centered builders. We both have Substacks. We love writing as a medium, and we met through a mutual friend because Nicole also has a strong background in corporate retail and has completely shifted gears in her life. We are both spiritual seekers, and I am so excited to have her on the show. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you for having me here. It's great to be here.
Oh, well, we met through our friend Sabrina, and I was thrilled when she introduced me to you, and we got to have a little call and chat and get to know each other and realize how much that we have in common. Tell us a little bit about what you do now, and then we'll kind of dive into how you came to be on that
Yeah,
path.
I feel like our first call, we could have spoken for hours. So I today am a certified coach and Reiki trained. So I use my more energetic tools to help people uncover what's getting in the way of them living their best life. So We start with vision, and then there's subconscious barriers that get in the way of us living in alignment. And part of my own guide and what I guide people in is listening and acting on their intuition again. Like, talk about rocking the boat. No one wants you to do that, right? But what I have learned in my own life is it's super easy to misinterpret your intuition if your subconscious is secretly running the show. So if you have trauma still in your body, if you have subconscious programming that you're not aware of, so that self-awareness journey is your greatest unlock to living in alignment with your best life.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense to me, especially right now in the journey I'm on and working to tap into my creative pursuits and creative outlets, but knowing there are things like financial blocks and I know we'll get into all of that, but I think it's so interesting and I'm curious if you find the same that it's easier for us to help other people with blind spots maybe than seeing our own. And so that's where a coach and a guide can help.
It really is such a journey of allowing yourself to be supported. And that is, as a people pleaser who is hyper independent and was raised by narcissists, I'm not always great at asking for help. I'm really still, after like over a decade of working on myself with all sorts of therapies and coaching, I still don't always know my needs or what I need. And so really tuning in, I have simple tools that I use now in myself. Where are my actions not matching my words? Then I use my meditation and guides to sort of help bring me clarity there. But even then, I recently have gone through like a sort of darker phase, and I wrote about it in my email this week and on Substack. I had to leverage like 7 tools in order to really get underneath that block and begin to shift it in my actions. Another gateway really is for people to see like what words are they using? How do things feel in their body? What keeps them up at night? What whispers are you not listening to? But truly the biggest unlock is, where do your actions not match what you say you want? And often it is in words. It's how you carry yourself, how you hold yourself. A greatest example that I have is when I was in New York City working in women's fashion, I said I wanted to meet a great guy. I'm in my late 30s. I'm still single. I have dedicated most of my life to my career. And when I became a certified coach a few years later, I realized how many of my actions didn't match what I said I wanted. I swiped left on dating apps. I didn't put myself out there in person. I stayed at home in my apartment hoping he would descend from the ceiling, right? So those are little ways where you say you want a thing, but your actions aren't adding up to that thing you said you wanted.
Yes, that is truth and a hard truth, I'm sure, for a lot of us to look at. You brought up your early career in New York, so why don't we go back to that time period and you tell the listeners a little bit about what you were doing at the time and then we'll get into where that led.
Yeah, I was an English literature major at the University of Michigan, and I remember when I chose that, I chose it because I felt connected and supported in that. And my dad asked, "What the hell are you going to do with that?" And so I had worked at J. Crew in the mall in the, early 2000s when J. Crew was cool, and I decided I wanted to go into corporate retail. But my first job was because a friend in college, dad, had been the head designer for a store that was owned by Williams-Sonoma Corporate. So he got me an in with their HR. So I had my first job at Williams-Sonoma Corporate in San Francisco. And then from there, I moved to West Elm in New York. And then I moved to Wisconsin to work for Land's End and up-level their home furnishings business. And that was a hot mess. So then I moved and was hired at Tory Burch. And I just remember knowing so much about everyone else around me, but not knowing myself. I didn't know my limits. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what I was good at. I was so wired to please others and to be high achieving, and I didn't know I was an empath. So I had no idea until I was in my early 30s. A psychic in Wisconsin who I went to for healing because I was not doing well at work, or I was succeeding on paper, but on the inside, I was not doing well. And he did my chart and he looked at me. His name is Ian Colin McAllister. He is this wonderful man. He is now an angel. So he is now watching us from heaven. He did my chart and then he looked at me and he said, "You need black tourmaline in your pockets, at your desk, whatever you do, you're soaking up everyone's energy." And I think I looked at him like a deer in headlights. I had no idea what that meant. I don't even think empath was really a term we used back then. That would have been 2010, 2011. I went straight to the store and bought black tourmaline and began to notice a difference, which got me thinking differently. Wait a minute, do I soak up everyone's stuff around me? What does this even mean? Then fast forward, I was working at Tory Burch and I met this guy, I dated him, and he was a narcissist and was very bad for me, which then led me on the healing journey of becoming certified in Reiki. And I don't know if you know anything about Reiki, but Reiki 1 is all about self-healing and self-care. And this whole concept of putting your oxygen mask on before somebody else's was eye-opening to me at 32 or 33. And so that is where my journey began. As I kept going towards my career in Tory Burch, I was looking up at the women ahead of me and didn't like that they didn't seem to have a balanced life. They didn't have strong relationships with themselves, their bodies, their partners, their kids. That was not the life that I wanted. So in 2020, when life gave me an opportunity to change, I let it rock the boat and I sailed with it. So that is where I am today.
I love that. We know that our paths are very similar. I think that Reiki has been a tool that I have used in my healing journey as well. And I'm like you, I saw a lot of women who were very career driven. And I think for some women that lights them up. And not to say anybody who wants to climb the ladder is wrong, but I think it's so great that you listened to your intuition and thought, that's not what I want. And I think that's the point that I've gotten to, and especially in menopause, where your hormones change and your brain changes, and you no longer feel the need to people please, which is kind of refreshing, but also a little strange. And I don't want my whole identity to define who I am and what I do. And I think too, I've been a little bit in denial of some of the gifts like you're talking about that. Being an empath, I always recommend to people Judith Orloff. It's the Empath Survival Guide, which is a great. You're nodding your head. I'm like, yes, we know this book. And so I think that in some ways I haven't leaned into that, and that's why I have so much admiration for you and the work that you do. Is because you have said this is a gift, and this is what I want to lean into. And for someone like me, I'm still struggling to let go of sort of that logical brain, and I had an engineer father. So I feel like there's analysis just embedded into my DNA. What were some of the first things that you started to offer that felt really aligned to what you wanted to do?
I would say I was offering just mini Reiki sessions. So you have to do Reiki to get your certification. And I would do card readings for my friends and Reiki. And I noticed I had a knack for leaving them lighter. The neuroscience on empaths, as we are wired so differently, we're about 15 to 20% of the population. The wiring of our systems mean we are tuned in more than those around us. We are sensing a consciousness. I don't even know exactly what it is, but we're sensing something that others can't. It's like dogs. Kai can smell 10,000 times more than we can. An empath is just another iteration of a human with higher sensing. When I walk into a room, I can tell where the heavy energy is. I can tell there's discord between people. I can instantly know what is needed or what is not needed or where I shouldn't be. What I found in my practice Reiki sessions with friends is I would get these visualizations and I would see things. And the greatest example I have is from my friend Katie. It was probably over a decade ago now. Pandemic makes time weird. I'm like, when was that?
Yes.
Over a decade ago. I was giving her practice Reiki. They always share with you what they want to shift or what's going on. And then I tune in, ask my guides to support me and just sense the energy and ask the Reiki to work through me to shift the energy. I saw these like vines wrapped around her heart, like cutting it off. And so I asked and worked with the energy with curiosity. I asked, is there anything I could do? And I heard, no, just keep working with the energy. It will naturally release, and then tell her about it. So I did. I followed the energy and then I told her about it. And then she told me she had been having heart pain, so much so that she was going to go to the doctor. Now, if you're having heart pain, please go to the doctor. She had not made the appointment yet. And when I gave her Reiki, her heart pain went away.
Wow.
I had no idea. She didn't tell me that for like a week later. And when you are in this space that's more gray, that is using intuitive as well as logic, you don't always get feedback. You just have to trust it. And so having people in your life who share with you, your intuition was spot on with that, or I was just thinking about you when you called, or that was what I needed to hear, even though it was hard for you to say, it helps you to trust what you're sensing.
Yes. Yeah, we tend to be dismissive of that because we think, oh, it's a coincidence. And really, that's all part of the synchronicity of life. And when we start to notice those patterns, it can be profound. I find the same when I offer sound healing. I know which bowls and notes to spend more time on. I remember a session where I spent more time on the throat chakra, and a woman told me afterwards something similar, that she had been having some pain in her throat and it seemed to dissolve over the course of our session. I love that even when our clients may not understand what's happening, they feel the results, and that's power enough. My mother booked me a sound session when I was around 25, climbing the corporate ladder, really stressed out. She took me to this woman who seemed like some, otherworldly sort of this cabin in the woods. And, you're thinking of like everything you would imagine in a movie that is, spiritual and woo. And I was so moved. I saw colors. I was a believer. And I
Yeah.
think then it still took me another 10 years to actually explore the practice further. As a kid, were there things like this that you were interested in that maybe you sort of dismissed and now you feel like you're coming home to?
Yes, absolutely. That is, with Reiki and then now with my coaching, I always call it an archaeological dig. All of this
Mm,
greatness has always lived it within you. We're just scuffing it off. So I love how you asked that question. Coaching is just a different method of a dig, an archaeological dig, right? Sound healing is too, which just a little sidebar moment. Have you heard of the University of Michigan study that is using sound to cure cancer?
I have not, but I am always interested in researching that more because I think people do want to know the science behind things and it can be difficult to explain. So I will look into that. I went to a Reiki share circle where one of the practitioners' mother was there, and she's an oncology nurse, and they were using Reiki in the hospital where she was at in the oncology unit.
Because some people dismiss it so easily. And then when my dad was passing, I went to the hospital and gave him Reiki. And the nurses who witness people passing all the time fully believe in Reiki. They were so glad that I was there and giving it to him. So it's super interesting who we choose to believe and not believe. But back to your question of when I was younger, I definitely was like a highly sensing child. I was obsessed with like light as a feather, stiff as a board. I was also very connected to nature and animals. I always wanted a dog, didn't get one until 4 years ago. Very connected to nature, very connected to horses, being outside, flowers, dogs, cats. I also really loved this super weird Disney movie that was about this like kids in England that fell down a time hole and didn't come back. It was super strange. I don't even know the name of it now.
Time Bandits, which I think that's we'll have to fact check this afterwards because I have a feeling it's the same movie that I've seen several times.
I also remember my dad's side of the family is French Canadian, and my grandpa was one of 11. And I was very connected to some of his sisters, even though they were living in Vermont and we were living in Illinois. So I maybe met my great aunt Armand specifically twice. I felt so safe and rooted with her. I saw her in my parents' living room after she passed. I know it. I remember it. And I remember sensing things as a little kid. The other thing I used to do, which I didn't realize it at the time, and I found out later, I would go to sleep by myself in my room. I would change the radio dial of my dreams. And now, after some podcasts I've listened to, that is a psychic trait. Psychics do that.
Okay.
I had no idea. It just naturally was like, I don't like the dream. Here's a radio dial. Switch, switch.
Wow.
And so I've done that since I was little.
That's incredible, especially if you're having a really bad nightmare or something, and just to be able to change the channel. I went with some friends to a store in Sedona and saw the original, Rider-Waite tarot deck, and it was like, "Oh my gosh, I remembered having one of these as a kid," but I had not thought about it in, gosh, probably 40 years. So it was, well, I guess more like 35. But around 15 was when I started getting into all of those things like you're talking about. And I think we just, yeah, I'm like you. I graduated college and I looked up what could I get a degree in and have make the most money right out of school. And it was a marketing degree and getting into marketing. And that's the route I went because it was the practical choice. So, but it's never too late. We get to revisit everything that we feel in our bodies and feel intuitively.
And well, that's where I think it gets really tricky, is because your intuition and your body speak to you uniquely, and mine do as well. And so it's about building those tools that empower us to be present. And like you, I come from a long line of engineers, very, very practical, thought based, logical human beings. And I believe that there are a lot of us right now that have a business background that are meant to bridge more logic based thinking and intuition. So I can talk to engineers about intuition and how it works and sort of get them closer, farther away from disbelieving, if that makes sense. Because we have that language of business, we can bridge the gap between this is what I'm feeling in my body, this is what I did about it, and this is what I saw as a result.
That's a great point because having lived in that world for so long, but then finding the relief that we do from the tools that we use, we are believers as well. Let's dive into some of the tools and what those look like. Why don't you share about some of those, especially the ones that you use frequently in your practice?
Yeah. So I think one of the hardest things for me leaving the corporate space and then choosing to go out on my own as a people pleaser, high achiever, I was so great at checking things off my to-do list for others, but really bad at checking things off my to-do list for myself. And then the entrepreneurial space today is a whole land of overwhelm, right? You could have a Substack, you could have an Instagram, you can have this. And actually, you're sort of taught to have all of them, and you're sort of taught to do 7,000 posts a day, right? It can be really exhausting and overwhelming, and you're not sure what to do. If you have a vision for your life and work and business that you're really clear on, and if you're a leader in a corporation, one thing that I do regularly is I meet with my spiritual board of directors. As I told you before the call, I recently fired my first spiritual board of directors. I had started with them 4 years ago, and they had gotten me so far, and I'm incredibly grateful for them. But now I want to do some bigger and better things. And I realized the gap that I had. So I created job descriptions. I went into meditation. I went into my heart space and meditation with the intention of I need support in this area of my business, this area of my business, and this area of my business. Here is who I want. Show me their credentials, who they've helped before, and let's get going. And you can ask for their names. I see kind of what they look like. And so I now have 4 new spiritual board of directors, in addition to my guides. The specific ones I've asked for are copy and creative director, because I could use some help with direct copy, PR and sales, tech, because tech is so overwhelming now.
Yes.
And then there is one more, funding. Now I meet with them and I tell them what I need. I thank them regularly. Thank you so much. I saw you did this quick thing. That was so great. And then every morning we meet and decide what are the key objectives that I need to put into action today. And it has really focused me as an entrepreneur, because you can just get so overwhelmed you do nothing, right? I could just sit and stare at my computer.
Yes.
And sometimes, for example, Substack, it takes 3 to 6 months to see any traction whatsoever. So you feel like you're speaking to the void. And a high achieving people pleaser, that is like death. Like it is like you, like, and an empath, I feel the discomfort in my body of writing to no one. And
Yes.
so the one way that I have found to keep myself going, I check in with my body. I check in with my intuition. Does this still feel right? Does it still feel light? And then I call my spiritual board of directors together.
My mind goes to, like, it's so easy for us to ask Chat GPT or ask Claude for these answers. And it's a people pleaser in itself. Like, it is a people pleasing platform, and it will tell you what you want to hear, and it will skip it. And so I think that
Unless you tell it not to. Like, you have to
that's true.
challenge me on this. Yeah.
That's true. I programmed one assistant within the business, and it was, "Do you want more direct?" And it was a little bit mean, and I thought, "Oh, no. Okay, I went too far the other direction." But I love that you are calling in exactly what you need right now, that feels very, like you said, unique to you, unique to your energetic signature, and who can help you. And it's important, like you said, and we may have talked about this on our first call, that thanking the guidance, whether that's intuition, or if you pray, if you, however you are asking for guidance and messages, to be thankful and grateful, because that reciprocity is important of energy. So they're doing a good job so far, first
So
weekend.
far for 1 week, I've seen quick action. So
Excellent.
we're gonna keep working together.
Excellent. I've been in an online yoga community for years, and we would do inner mentor ceremonies and go out 10 or 15 years and call in our inner wise woman and see what our future version of ourselves how they would guide us. We would have conversations. And I got so much out of that, because one very clear session said, you're an author and a retreat host. And I made both of those things happen in that year. So like you said, things can happen lightning fast when you have the right conversations.
There is a beautiful meditation that I've kind of ran with, that I learned parts of it from the woman I'm certified through coaching, whose name is Nancy Levin. And it is this future you meditation where you envision you across a river and you jump to meet future you, and you see what is the life they're living, what do they do. And then you can tie in other coaching prompts. What personas do they have? What personas do you currently have that you need to let go of or embody more? So, for example, I had denied bossy. I'm not bossy enough. And when you deny a trait, the psychology behind it is that it comes out sideways and you can't use it for yourself. So when we're little, we hear things like, don't be too bossy. So we put this thought in our subconscious that says bossy equals bad, bossy equals my parents not loving me. So as an adult, when we're about to challenge our comfort zone and maybe we need to be a little bit more like a boss, we don't do it and then we hold ourselves back. And so integrating these parts of ourselves into future you, and then deciding what habits does the me that has, the writing and a retreat do all the time? What does she do? How does she live her life? And then becoming those habits. I was really inspired by the University of Michigan men's basketball team this year, and I didn't even know they were good. So sorry, guys. My boyfriend had told me, do you want to watch Michigan play Michigan State before March Madness? And I didn't. And I rudely said, why? And he said, they're really good this year, which they weren't good last year. So that's talking about timelines, it's a quick timeline shift. And the coach had said to them a year ago, what championship habits do we need to do every day to be in April playing in March Madness still? And so they have a lot of other great things that they do. They focus on mindset. They talk very openly about mental health. They have rituals together as a team, which rituals are key to us feeling safe in our greatness. And championship habits. What are your next year? What do we want to be next year? And what habits do we need to start today to make next year happen?
That is sound advice for anybody who is listening.
And that's where the logic parts of it, the engineering part meets the magic part.
Yes. I lean on that a lot, that athletes are incredible at visualization. And my husband watches a popular barrel racer named Fallon Taylor, and she has come back from serious injury, working her way back to the top. And she said recently on a YouTube that things happen twice. once in your mind and once in real life. And so visualization for anyone who even can't wrap their mind around the more spiritual side of it, like there are a lot of practical people who are leaning into that idea. And then when you combine that with spiritual practice and listening to your intuition, then you are incredibly powerful.
And your body twitches in visualization as if it's real. So you're beginning to create that muscle memory.
Okay. I did not know that. So
yes. So that is what is happening. I mean, Air Force pilots visualize their flight before getting in. Rory McIlroy, I always pronounce his last name wrong. I am so sorry. He just won the Masters for the second year in a row. And there is a video of him. I don't know where it is available, but he talks about shadow beliefs. He talks about the shadows of those that played the course before him. He talks about uprooting and playing his own game. And when he plays his own game, he's better at withstanding the ups and downs. And he talks about vision a lot, visualization.
I want to make sure that you have enough time to listen to the second half of my conversation with Nicole Beaudin. We've talked about the ways in which we discovered that we wanted to be more spiritual, even though we were in demanding corporate retail careers. And next week, we'll dive more into Nicole's work today, what it looks like for her to unlock subconscious beliefs. And right where we left off talking about shadows, we'll talk about shadow work and those limiting beliefs that we have. Follow and subscribe to the show because you will absolutely want to tune in for the second half of my conversation with Nicole Beaudin. It is worth the wait. You've been listening to Rock the Damn Boat, a podcast produced and recorded by Christy Hughes. You can follow, subscribe on both Apple and Spotify, and your 5-star review goes a long way. Thank you so much for your support of the show.